Once you develop and foster a good relationship with the Lord, you start to feel bulletproof. And, that can kind of lead you astray a little bit if you think about it, because I always think things should happen on my timeline. Hey, I prayed for it. Where's it at? Hey, God is protecting me. Nothing bad will happen to me. But I think some people are still struggling, not because they do not care about God. They're struggling because they cared, they trusted, they hoped, they prayed, and life still hit them hard. That can change a person. It'll change the way you look at the future. It'll change how fast you let your heart believe. It'll change how open you are when somebody says, just trust God. It'll change the way you pray, and it'll change the way you hope. Because once life has hurt you enough, trust stops feeling simple. Hey, we're human. You can still believe God is real. You can still believe Jesus is Lord. You can still want to be close to Him. But something inside you becomes slower, more careful, more guarded with the relationship, more tired. And I think a lot of people feel guilty about that. They think if they were stronger, they would trust faster. If they were better, they would not hesitate. And if they really had faith, they would not still feel this tension in their chest every time they try to hand something over to God. But sometimes the issue is not rebellion. Sometimes the issue is just pain. Sometimes the reason you're slow to trust is because you have lived through things that left a mark on you. You asked God for healing and it did not come the way you hoped. You prayed for a relationship and it still broke apart. You begged for peace and still spent nights wrestling in your own mind. Or you believed things were going to turn around and instead they got heavier. And that does something to a heart. And the hardest part is that people around you can make it sound easy. They say, trust God, like it's a switch. They speak about it like you can just flip it back on. Like wounds don't affect trust. Like disappointment does not change how a person opens their heart. But if you've been hurt deeply enough, trust can start to feel dangerous. Not just with people, but with God too. You do not always say that out loud, and most people don't. You just feel it. You feel it in the pause before prayer. You feel it in the way your hope pulls back a little. You feel it when a new burden shows up and your first instinct is not peace, it's tension. You feel it when a part of you wants to believe, but another part of you is bracing for more pain. And you know what? That's real. And I think we need to say something clearly here. Being wounded is not the same thing as not loving God. Being cautious is not the same thing as turning your back on Him. And being tired is not the same thing as being faithless. Some people are not hard-hearted, they're just hurt-hearted. There's a difference. And Jesus knows the difference. Don't think He doesn't. I think we have to be a certain way or God will turn away. God's expecting a certain set of words or a certain prayer. God is just expecting you to show up the way you are. He's not afraid of hard questions, and He's not afraid of misunderstanding. You see, that matters. Because a lot of people think they have to hide the struggle from God. They think they have to come to Him sounding strong, sounding certain, or sounding steady. With a mitigation strategy in place already. You're going to solve your own problems. And then you sound more put together than you really are. But Jesus, you see, Jesus has never been intimidated by the truth. He's not scared of your hesitation. He's not offended by your questions, no matter what they are. And he's not disappointed that trust feels hard for you right now. He already knows why. He already knows what happened. He knows what you lost. He knows how many prayers you prayed. He knows what let you down. He knows where the wound is. And he's not standing far away from that place. He's standing right there in it. I think sometimes people imagine trust like this big heroic feeling, like one giant moment where you finally feel fearless and hand everything over to God with no tension left in you. Boom, miracle, problem solved. But a lot of real trust does not look like that. A lot of real trust looks much smaller, quieter, and more honest. It looks like saying, God, I still want to believe you, even though part of me is struggling right now. You know, it looks like praying while still feeling shaky. It looks like opening your Bible when your heart feels tired. It looks like coming back to Jesus without pretending you are not wounded. And it looks like telling him the truth instead of performing strength. That is still trust. Maybe not the loud version that social media and the modern world tells you it needs to be, but it's a real version. And sometimes the real version is more precious because it costs more. Anybody can say they trust God when life makes sense. Anybody can say they trust God when the answers come fast. Anybody can say they trust God when the road is smooth. But when you've been disappointed and you still turn toward Jesus, even slowly or carefully with tears in your eyes, that matters. And that's not fake faith, my friends. That is costly faith. And the truth is, broken trust does not heal through pressure. It heals through love. And Jesus does not heal your trust by yelling at you to trust harder. He heals your trust by showing you who he is. He stays with you. He's patient. He does not walk away from your weakness. He does not shame your pain. And he does not demand that you become fearless overnight. He keeps meeting you again and again. And that's how trust begins to grow again. Not because your life suddenly becomes easy. Not because every prayer gets answered right away. Not because all the pain disappears like that. But because somewhere in the middle of your real life, you start to realize that Jesus is still kind, still steady, still present, still faithful, and still close. And little by little, the heart starts to soften again. Not all at once, not in some polished, dramatic way, but in real ways. You pray again. You hope again. You open up again. You stop assuming every silence means abandonment. You stop treating every delay like rejection. And you start to see just because life hurt you does not mean Jesus failed you. That's an important line. Life can wound you deeply without Jesus becoming untrustworthy. People can fail you without Jesus failing you. Outcomes can break your heart without Jesus breaking his word. And seasons can confuse you without Jesus losing control. And I know that's hard to hold when you're in the middle of pain, because pain seems to narrow everything. It makes the wound feel like the whole story. It makes the disappointment feel final. It makes the trust feel risky. But Jesus is not asking you to trust him because your pain is small. He's asking you to trust him because he is still bigger than your pain. He is still good when you do not understand, still near when you feel slow to believe, still merciful when your heart feels bruised, and still strong when you do not have much strength left. So, if trust feels hard right now, don't pretend. Do not force some polished spiritual answer, and do not act like you are farther along than you are. Just be honest. Tell Jesus the truth. Tell him you're tired. Tell him you're cautious. Tell him you want to trust him, but something in you is still hurting. Tell him life hit you hard. And tell him disappointment has changed you. Bring him the real thing, because you know what? That's where healing starts. Not in pretending, but in honesty. And maybe that's the word for somebody right now. You're not bad because trust feels hard. You're not weak because your heart is careful. You are not failing because pain made you slower to open up. You're human. You're wounded. And Jesus still wants you close. So come back to him honestly. Not polished, not impressive, and not pretending. Just be honest with him. Because even if trust feels hard right now, Jesus is still gentle enough to rebuild it. And that's the truth. My name is Douglas Vandergraph, and I believe in Jesus Christ. God bless every single one of you. Every single one.